She's crashing. That's all they said. Room 5. Female. 72. Brought in alone. No wallet. No ID. Found unconscious in the back booth of a diner on 82nd. The paramedics had to guess her name from a prescription bottle in her purse. They guessed right. Dolores Lee. My mother-in-law. My stepmother. Actually, just Dolores. The woman who once looked me in the eye and said, "Don't use my last name. You're not family." That was 17 years ago. I hadn't seen her since. Now here I was, ICU nurse, on shift, gown pulled, gloves on, reading her vitals as the team swarmed around her. She was gray, labored breath, left side limp, stroke severe. I stayed quiet, just watched, professional, detached, until the charge nurse handed me her chart. "There's a partial DNR in place," she said. "But the next of kin is blank." Wait. No. Found something on her phone. She tapped the screen. Emergency contact, Vivian Lee relationship. Daughter. My hand tightened around the clipboard. They all looked at me. Waited. I didn't say anything. What was there to say? The woman who refused to sign my college checks, but cashed every condolence card with my father's name on it, had put me down as the final signature. I looked through the glass wall. She was still unconscious. Still silent. Of course she was. Dolores always did her talking through other people. But this one was mine. To witness, to hold, to sign. Or not. I didn't move. I didn't cry. I just stood there, in the place she never wanted me. And somehow the last one, she still had. Before I tell you what I did next, let me know where you're watching from. And subscribe if you believe silence doesn't make someone family. I was 6 when Mom died. Esther Lee, nurse, piano teacher, the kind of woman who wore scentless lotion and sang hymns while folding laundry. One day she had a headache. The next, she was gone. Aneurysm? Quick. Quiet. Dad didn't speak much after. I'd find him staring at the piano like it had cursed us. A year later, Dolores moved in. She wore perfume so sharp it made my eyes water. Never once sat at the piano. Never once touched Mom's sheet music, still stacked in the corner. I asked her once, "Can we frame one of Mom's pictures?" She didn't even look up. We don't need ghosts in this house. From that day on, the only photos in the hallway were of her, Dad, and later, her church friends. None of me. None of Esther. I wasn't punished, not really. I was just trimmed out. No birthday cakes. No school concerts. No, good job, on spelling tests. Dolores wasn't cruel. She was organized. Teddy, professional in her absence of warmth, she made me set the table every night. Forks on the left. Napkin triangle facing down. I learned to fold silence like linens. By 12, I stopped calling her anything. Not Mom. Not Dolores. Just A. She liked it that way. I could tell by how quickly she looked away when I said it. It wasn't hate. It was erasure. And erasure doesn't scream. It just doesn't mention you at all. By 15, I realized I didn't need her name to exist. I was still here. Even if no one said so. I left for nursing school the day after I turned 18. No send-off. No suitcase gift. Just Dolores handing me a grocery bag with a half-used toothbrush and a winter coat 2 sizes too big. "Don't ask for help," she said. "I believe in women figuring things out." I figured things out. Worked night shifts. Took student loans. Ate peanut butter for weeks. Dad mailed me 3 books. Old anatomy texts from his college days. No note inside. Just a sticky tab on the heart diagram that said, "Take care of yours." I kept that page long after the binding split. Dolores never visited. Never called. Never asked how finals went. She wasn't cruel. She was simply done. I graduated at 22. Found a job at Mercy Hills ICU in Portland. Small place. Good people. Quiet death. A year later, Dad died. Heart attack. In his truck outside the hardware store. I found out from my Aunt May. 3 days after the funeral. Dolores handled everything, she said. She said you were too busy to come. I wasn't told. I wasn't invited. I wasn't listed in the obituary. Just cut. No grave to stand at. No photo to keep. No chance to say anything. I drove down anyway. 5 hours in a borrowed car with a bouquet and a note that just said, I wasn't too busy. The front porch light was off. Curtains drawn. No answer at the door. I didn't knock twice. Just stood there, flowers wilting in my hands, and realized I wasn't locked out. I'd never been let in. After the porch, I drove straight back to Portland. Didn't stop for gas. Didn't stop for grief. Didn't stop for anything. The highway lights blurred past. I remember thinking how strange it was to feel so heavy and yet be moving so fast. I didn't cry. Tears felt inappropriate, like something belonged to people who were invited to mourn. Not me, just work. Double shifts, on-call weekends, charting, checking, watching. Mercy Hills became my second skin. IVs, crash carts, DNRs, they made sense. Grief in doses, pain with timing. Predictable endings, I specialized in endings. People came in dying. We tried. Sometimes they stayed, mostly they didn't. No Dolores there. No empty seats at family consults. No unspoken names on emergency forms. Just patients. And me. People said I was good. She's calm. She doesn't take things home. What they meant was, she doesn't leak. Truth is, I'd already leaked out long ago. I married once. A fellow nurse. Gentle, smart, funny in the kitchen. We tried. But some people are made for weekends. I was made for midnights. He wanted Sunday pancakes. I wanted silence. He needed arms around him. I needed doors that closed. We ended gently. No fights, no kids, just goodbye. I kept the apartment. And the drawer. Inside the drawer, beneath spare keys, expired insurance cards, and an old stethoscope, was one envelope. Dad's handwriting. Slanted, careful, familiar. A little too formal for a man who once called me Squirt. No date. No return address. Just Vivian. On the front. I never opened it. Not because I was scared of what it said, but because I already knew what it wouldn't undo. It wouldn't erase Dolores. It wouldn't restore a grave I was never allowed to see. It wouldn't explain why he mailed textbooks but didn't call when I graduated. It wouldn't change how silence was his safest language. Sometimes I held it in my hand and thought, if I open this, what happens to the part of me that still believed he might have tried? And then I'd put it back. Close the drawer. Turn off the light. Not everything needs to be finished to be real. Some truths are quiet, unopened, and still enough. I didn't go see her the next day. Didn't ask for updates. Didn't peek at vitals. Didn't check the chart with her name on it. She was still unconscious. Still alone. Still not my problem. At least, that's what I told myself. Around noon, Nurse April brought over a brown paper bag. Hey, this was in the locker, she said. Patient's belongings. Has your name listed since you're on file? I blinked. Then nodded. Took the bag, held it like it might bite. There was a tag stapled to the front as LEEDROM 5 INT AKI 07 12 AMs. I carried it to the break room, closed the door, sat down, breathed once, then opened it. First, her wallet, red leather, zipped, cash. No photos, just an old insurance card and a laminated prayer card that said, "He gives his hardest battles to his strongest soldiers." See, I set it aside. Next, pill bottles. One labeled for blood pressure, another for something I couldn't pronounce. Both filled. Barely touched. She hadn't been taking them. Then came the paper. A few sheets, folded twice. No envelope. I almost tossed them in the bin, but something. The weight maybe. Made me stop. I unfolded the first page. The ink was soft brown, like it had faded through decades. At the top, in looped cursive faller, for Vivian summer practice. Esther Lee June 1983's, my breath caught. Below that, staff lines, quarter notes, little penciled fingerings like she used to do when my hands were too small to reach octaves. I blinked hard. Turned the page. The second sheet was unfinished. Bars half empty. As if she stopped mid-melody and never came back. My fingers trembled. She kept this. Dolores kept this. After everything. After photos erased and birthdays skipped and graves sealed without me. Why? Why carry a ghost you worked so hard to bury? I went home without finishing my shift. Told them I had a headache. Didn't lie. Just didn't say where it was. The sheet music stayed folded in my coat pocket the whole ride home. Like it might disappear if I let it go. At the apartment, I walked past the kitchen, past the light switch, straight to the hall closet. Top shelf, old shoebox. Rubber bands snapped as I pulled. Inside it, tax papers. Letters from college. One dried flower pressed flat in wax paper. And then, the copy. Faint, creased, but still there. S6. For Vivian summer practice. Say Esther's handwriting, blurred by cheap toner dye in time. I made the copy at the library in 7th grade. Back when Dolores said it wasn't appropriate to hang my mother's music on the fridge. So I hid it, like a relic, like a sin. I laid both versions side by side, hers and mine, one fading in ink, one fading in copy, same notes, same title, same mistake in measure 4. I remembered it. She made the wrong note intentional. Said it kept the melody from becoming forgettable. I sat down at the electric keyboard, gathering dust in the corner. Plugged it in. Hit the power. The hum felt like breath I hadn't taken in years. Fingers hovered. Fell, missed. Fell again. Wrong tempo. Flat chord. Too fast. I stopped. Started again. Didn't cry. Didn't need to. The melody wasn't asking for perfection. Just return. Dolores had carried this. For years. Buried it under pills and insurance cards. But it was here now. And it didn't belong to her. It belonged to the girl with shaky fingers. And a mother who made even mistakes feel like music. I couldn't sleep, played the first 8 bars until my fingers ached. Then sat in silence watching the LED clock blink past 3:07. Why did she keep it? What kind of woman erases a child but keeps her mother's handwriting folded next to her heart pills? The next morning I went in early. Didn't wait for the shift report. Didn't say good morning. Just walked straight to the nurse's station and logged in. Her chart was still under my access. I told myself it was routine, that I was updating allergy info. No one questioned it. Vitals, labs, med history, and then medications alprazolam a 0.25 mg PRN 2007-2015 colors prescribing Dr. Raymond Keller, diagnosis acute anxiety, bereavement related 8 years. Right after Dad died. And then nothing, no refills, no therapy notes. Just silence. I stared at the screen. Tried to feel something. Pity, maybe understanding, maybe proof that she was more than just the woman who shut the door when I came with flowers. But all I felt was the same heaviness I'd carried since I was 6. Grief doesn't justify erasure. Pain doesn't make a mother out of someone who never said the word. I closed the chart, logged out, walked to the supply room, and pulled out a ream of staff printer paper. At the back, behind the census sheets, was a forgotten copier. I placed the music on the glass, flattened the page, pressed copy. The light stuttered once, then whirred. Out came a fresh version. Not faded, not smudged. At the top, in my mother's ink boss, for Vivian summer practice. Esther Lee, June 1983's. I held it flat in both hands. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was stealing it back. It felt like it had finally come home. The ICU was quiet that morning. Not peaceful, just quiet. Monitors hummed softly. IV pump clicked. A flat screen blinked blue over the door. Sus room, 5 isolation post-stroke observation only. I hesitated outside the glass wall. Could have turned back. No one would know. But my hand was already holding the paper. The copy. Clean. Uncreased. Esther's name sharp in black ink. I stepped in. Closed the door behind me with a sound softer than breath. Dolores lay still. Half her face slack. Right eye closed. Left eye fluttering. A nasal cannula delivered oxygen in soft puffs. Chest rising slow. Barely. She looked smaller than I remembered. Not in size, in weight. Like a coat left too long in the rain. I didn't speak. Just stood there. 10 steps from the foot of the bed. Closer than I'd ever been since I was 17. Her hands were resting on a thin hospital blanket. No rings. Nails short, clean. No sign of the woman who once wore coral polish and folded napkins like origami. The machine beeped. A steady rhythm. Faint but alive. She stirred. One eye opened, roving, slow. It landed on me. Paused. Blankness first. Then something else. Recognition. Regret. I couldn't tell. Her throat moved. Barely a whisper. You came. Not a question. Not a greeting. Just an observation. A fact. I didn't answer. Didn't nod. Just stood with Esther's music pressed to my chest. This wasn't forgiveness. Wasn't reunion. It was a beginning of something that might never have a name. But still, I stayed. She didn't say anything else. Just closed her eyes again, like the effort of seeing me had already cost too much. I stayed. Didn't know why. Maybe because for the first time in my life, she couldn't leave. I sat on the chair near the bed. Folded the sheet music, slipped it into my coat. The beeping lulled, steady, predictable. Unlike the memory that rose without warning. December 2005. I was 24. Still fresh out of nursing school. Home for Christmas because Dad asked. They'd done the house up big. Plastic reindeer. Gold ribbon on the banister. Dolores made ham and scalloped potatoes. Said grace like it was an audition. After dinner, someone brought out the camera. By the tree, Dolores said. Come on, everyone. I stood between Dad and Aunt May. Dolores called. Vivian, will you grab the apple pie from the kitchen? I went. Took my time. Balanced the tray. When I came back, they were laughing. Holding still, flash already gone. Oh, I said. Did you get it? Just the one for the card, Dolores said. You'll be in the next. There was no next. That photo ended up printed, framed, hung in the hallway the following year. I wasn't in it. I asked Dad once. Quietly. If he noticed. He looked away and said, she probably just forgot. But she didn't forget. I remembered how she smiled after the flash. How she placed her hand on Dad's shoulder and said, let's keep it family in the frame. Like I wasn't in the room. Wasn't part of the walls I scrubbed and the dishes I dried. I never said anything. Until now. I leaned forward, looked at the woman in the bed, soft, still, somehow smaller than her shadow. And I whispered, I was in the room, Dolores. I always was. It started around midnight. Her creatinine spiked. Oxygen dipped. The nurse charted confusion. She spoke a few words, none clear. Tried to sit up, failed. By morning, she was unresponsive again. The ICU attending pulled me aside. Kidney functions crashing, he said. No advance directive. No family except you. We need decisions. I sat in the consult room. They called it the quiet room. Soft lighting. One round table. 2 chairs. A box of tissues already half used. The doctor sat across from me, chart open, pen in hand. Would she want dialysis? He asked. Intubation. Full code. Comfort care only. I stared at the chart. Dolores Lee, age 72. No allergies listed. Emergency contact Vivian Lee daughter. That word again. On forms. On screens. But never once on her tongue. She never called me that. Not once. I folded my hands. She didn't want her name used, I said. Once told me not to claim it. Not to carry it. The doctor waited. Didn't interrupt. I looked down at my badge. Vivian Lee, RN ICU Mercy Hills. She didn't want me to use her last name. But she used mine to stay alive. The irony tasted like rust. I didn't answer right away. Didn't sign anything. Just held the pen. I thought about the photo. The hallway with my face missing. The piano. The drawer. The music. I thought about what it means to speak for someone who never let you speak at all. Then I wrote one word on the consultation form. Ox unknown. Not out of malice. Not out of anger. But because I truly did not know. Not what she wanted. Not who she saw when she looked at me. And if I was going to carry her name one last time, I wasn't going to pretend she ever gave it to me. I capped the pen. Stood up and left the rest to medicine. They gave me the key to the storage locker. Said there wasn't much. A coat. One pair of shoes. A few folders she kept in a tote bag under the bed. Standard protocol, they told me. No next of kin. You're all she had. I didn't correct them. The locker was on the 4th floor. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, smelled like antiseptic and old grief. I unzipped the tote bag. It was heavy for its size. Inside a maroon sweater. A tiny radio. 2 pill bottles. Both nearly full. And at the bottom, a plastic file folder with a single envelope tucked in between tax documents. I almost missed it. It was aged, yellowed at the corners, creased in the middle. No stamp. No address. Just one line in narrow, slanted cursive. The suckers, to Esther. I never got to say this. I froze. It wasn't my father's handwriting. It was hers. Dolores. My throat tightened. I sat down on the edge of a linen cart and peeled the flap open. The paper inside was smooth, pressed flat like it had been read 100 times by the woman who never sent it. The letter began, Sachs. You were always the one they talked about. At church. At the co-op. At his work events. Esther this. Esther that. And I was just the one who came after. I read on. She didn't apologize. Not directly. She admitted she envied Esther. Her voice. Her piano. The quiet way people leaned in when she entered a room. She said Esther made it hard to forget her, even after she was gone. That no matter how much she folded sheets or served at the church bazaar, Esther remained in the corners of the house. And so did I. I tried, she wrote. I tried to raise her girl like mine. But she looked at me with your eyes. She moved like you. And I couldn't reach her without feeling like a thief. I stopped. Let the page fall into my lap. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't closure. It was confession. The cruelest kind. Not because it hated, but because it ached. Dolores didn't reject me because I wasn't hers. She rejected me because I was hers too late. Because I was what she could never replace. I brought the letter home. Didn't fold it. Didn't hide it. Just laid it down on the kitchen table, beside an empty mug and a half-dead plant I kept forgetting to water. I stared at it for maybe an hour. Maybe more. My hand reached toward the old drawer beneath the sink. The one with matches and loose batteries and a flashlight that never worked. I held a box of matches without striking one. The urge to burn it wasn't about anger. It was about power. Control. The idea that maybe, if I destroyed her words, I could keep mine safe. But I didn't light the flame. Didn't crumple the letter. Didn't tear it in half. I left it where it was. Exposed. Ungiven. Like every word it carried. That night I dreamed. I don't dream often. At least not in color. But this was all golden light and wood floors. The old kitchen. The one with the humming fridge and chipped tile. Mom was there. Esther. In her house dress. Hair pinned back. Sitting at the piano we'd sold right after the funeral. She was playing summer practice. Slowly. Each note like a breath held too long, then let go. I stood in the doorway, watching her back. My feet were bare. I could feel the cool linoleum. Could smell lemon polish air and tomato soup. She turned. Smiled. Then did something she never had in any dream before. She moved over on the bench. Made space. Little me, 6 years old, appeared beside her. Sat down. Laid small fingers on ivory keys like they weren't afraid. She didn't speak. Didn't need to. We played together. Wrong notes and all. And for the first time in any memory, real or imagined. We were both in the picture. When I woke up, I was crying. Not because she was gone, but because, finally, she took me with her. The dream stayed with me longer than I expected. I walked into work with the image of her hands on mine. Esther's, gliding gently, like she always did before the silence took her. Room 5 was unchanged. Dolores lay still, face slack. One hand twitching every few minutes, like she was reaching for something, but couldn't grasp it. I checked the monitors. Her vitals were holding. But that didn't mean much anymore. The ICU attending met me in the hallway. He didn't mince words. She's post-stroke, 2nd week, no eye tracking, no purposeful movement. She won't recover full cognition. He paused. It's just a matter of when. Hospice? They didn't say the word, but I could feel it in the way. He didn't ask if she had preferences. Only if I did. She listed you as her contact, he added. Which means decisions come through you. I nodded. Didn't answer. Just nodded. We sat in the consult room again. Same table. Same tissues. Same hum of the ceiling fan that never quite kept the air moving. They laid out the options: dialysis, prolonged pain; ventilator, prolonged cost; hospice, manage dignity. They asked me to think about her wishes. But no one knew what they were. Not even her. Not really. She never said what she wanted in life. Why would death be any different? I closed my eyes. And in the dark, I didn't see Dolores. I heard my mother. A single note. Then another. A fragile, unfinished melody playing quietly in the background of my own pulse. Not a command. Not a warning. Just a nudge. When I opened my eyes, I looked at the doctor. She should go to hospice, I said. Calm. Certain. Not because Dolores asked. Not because I owed her. But because some legacies deserve to end without noise. And some daughters choose the quiet for themselves. The hospice intake form was 10 pages long. Most of it was standard. Medications. Allergies. Insurance. I answered them all without pause. Then came page 6. Russ' legal name for transfer documentation. My pen hovered. I wrote Ithaz Dolores. Then finished. Asaz Lee. Us. But something about the shape of those 4 letters looked wrong on my handwriting. It felt borrowed. Unwanted. Like a key to a door that had never been opened to me. I heard it again. Her voice, clear as crystal. Sucks. Don't use my last name. She said it when I asked to hyphenate at 16. When I filled out a 5FA with Lee as my legal ID. When she mailed my graduation invite back with return to sender scribbled across the envelope. She never gave it to me, but she signed every form with mine when she listed me as emergency contact. Used my name to stay alive. I looked at the paper, at the space where her name had been printed on insurance cards, prayer lists, church directories. A name she protected from me, but claimed when convenient. I reached for the form, folded it in half, then tore it clean down the middle. The hospice rep blinked. Something wrong? I met her eyes. Yes. Can I get a blank copy? She slid one over. Didn't ask more. I filled out every line again. Slow, clean, focused. Then I reached the name field. How should we list her? It asked. I wrote Dolores, ours no middle, no last, no inheritance of history. When the rep asked why, I said simply, she never wanted to share it. Now she doesn't have to. She nodded, didn't smile, didn't pity me, just stapled the pages all and walked away. And for the first time, the name that erased me no longer had a place was to hide behind. The hospice was quiet in a different way. Not sterile. Not clinical. Soft light. Fresh linens. Walls painted in warm peach instead of hospital gray. I handed the signed forms to the front desk and turned toward the exit. As I passed the common room, I heard it. Faint, off-tempo, but familiar. Notes. On a piano that hadn't been tuned properly in years. I paused, backtracked. Peeked through the doorway. An old man sat hunched at the keys, hands trembling slightly as he worked through each bar. As summer practice, I'm my mother's song. His left hand lagged behind. The melody lost shape in places. A C where there should have been an A, but he didn't stop. Didn't apologize. Just kept going. A nurse nearby folded towels. Didn't even look up, as if the music had become part of the wallpaper. I stood there. Hands in my pockets. Let the sound wash over me. I didn't correct him. Didn't step in. There was a time when I would've. When I thought every mistake was a betrayal. That honoring someone meant playing their notes perfectly. But that's not what Esther taught me. She wrote the fourth bar with the wrong rhythm on purpose. Said, a song isn't music until it breaks a little. The man hit another wrong note. Winced. Then kept playing. I smiled. Felt it in my throat, not grief. Not regret. Something softer. Like surrender. I didn't stay. Didn't wait for the end. Just turned and walked toward the parking lot. Behind me, the piano kept playing. Wrong notes. Right song. Still alive. I didn't turn on the lights when I got home. Let the dusk spill across the floor. Kicked off my shoes. Boiled water just to hear it hum. Then I sat at the kitchen table, same place I'd laid the letter. Same chair I never offered to guests. I pulled out a blank sheet of paper. No envelope. No plan. Just wrote, dear Vivian. Utter not Dolores, not Esther, just a Vivian, the 6-year-old version, the one with crooked pigtails and scraped knees and questions no one ever answered. I didn't explain anything. Didn't try to make Dolores better. Didn't rewrite my father. I just said the truth. Axe, you were always in the room, even when no one looked, even when they cropped you out. You were there. I told her how strong she was for staying soft. How brave she was for trying to belong in a place that built walls instead of doors. I wrote, Haas, it wasn't your fault they didn't see you. Some people are born blind to grace. I reminded her she was real, even without cake, even without photos, even without a name spoken out loud. You don't need proof to exist. You are the proof. When I finished, I didn't fold the letter. Didn't hide it. I opened the drawer where the old copy of Mom's music still lived, laid the letter beside it. Not beneath. Not behind. Beside. Equal. Seen. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was keeping a secret. I felt like I was keeping a promise. The call came just after 10 a.m. Hospice nurse. Calm voice, measured words. Her breathing's shallower, BP's dropping. We think it may be 24 to 48 hours. I didn't say much. Just listened. Thanked her. Wrote it down like I was charting vitals for a stranger. Before she hung up, she asked, would you like to notify anyone? Family. friends, pastor. The silence on my end stretched too long. She didn't rush me. No, I said finally. There's no one to call. I sat there for a minute after. Phone still warm in my hand. No one to call. No one to tell. I opened the photo app. Swiped past grocery receipts, screenshots of recipes I'd never make. Paused. Then tapped the camera. That afternoon I walked back into her room. She was asleep. Or something close to it. Eyes closed. Lips slightly parted. Chest rising in uneven waves. The piano version of Summer Practice I was playing from the speaker I'd tucked into her nightstand drawer. Soft. Barely there. I lifted the phone. Framed the shot carefully. Didn't show my face. Didn't speak, just held the lens on the woman who never gave me a name, but used mine to be seen. 10 seconds. 15. Then I stopped. Saved it. Scrolled down and renamed the file as proof I stayed. Thus not for her. Not for court. Not for some legacy she never wrote. For me. Because for once, the daughter they forgot to frame was the only one who didn't walk away. She passed at 4:17 a.m., no code called. No alarms. Just one final breath and then nothing. The hospice nurse left me a voicemail. Kind voice. Too soft for the world it had to say. I arrived at 6:40. Fog still hugging the streetlights. The kind of morning where everything looks like it's holding its breath. They led me to her room. The bed was already made. Sheets tucked tight. Window open an inch. I didn't ask where she was. Didn't need to. What remained wasn't what I came for. The front desk handed me a clipboard. Lines, boxes, fields to fill. Date of death. Cause. Next of kin. Signature of legal contact. I read each line once. Then again. The pen felt steady in my hand. For the first time. No shaking. No hesitation. No second guess. I signed Vivian Lee. Black ink. Clear loops. They thanked me. Gave me the original for records. No one asked if I needed time. I didn't. Instead, I walked 2 blocks to the corner flower shop. Picked out a simple standing spray. White dahlias. Pale carnations. A few pink peonies she used to cut from our backyard before I was old enough to know what pruning meant. When the clerk asked, "Name on the card?" I shook my head. No card. She looked confused. I didn't press. I paid in cash. Left the receipt on the counter. At home, I placed a smaller bouquet on my kitchen table. Same flowers. Different meaning. Not mourning. Not forgiveness. Just acknowledgement. I whispered. You not for her, but for me. So he didn't want the name. So I gave you what you asked. Silence. 1 week after the funeral, a manila envelope arrived with my name scrawled in ballpoint and the return address. Probate Office, Multnomah County. I opened it without ceremony. No expectations, no dread. Inside, legal inventory, her estate, or what was left of it, no home. She'd sold the house in 2018, no vehicle, no jewelry of value, one checking account with 142.77 and a debit card that expired last March. But there was a folder. Title laws. Charitable contributions, annual deductions. I flipped through. Year after year. The same entry. TFDS, recurring anonymous donation, Women in Medicine Fund, Portland, OR, under alias E. Lee. I blinked. Read it again. Sex E. Lee, Docs Esther. I googled the fund. It existed. A local scholarship for women pursuing nursing and medical degrees with financial need. Small, not well known. Founded by a retired OB/GYN and run out of a neighborhood clinic. Dolores had given worth $1,000 in a year for 5 years. Always anonymously. Always under that name. It didn't make sense. She hated sentiment. Hated legacy. She never spoke of philanthropy. Never praised women in science. And yet, she used my mother's name to fund the exact life she tried to erase. Was it guilt? Regret? A way to rewrite her memory without asking me to join? Or was it something else? Something quieter? I checked the website. List of current recipients, photos, bios. One name caught me. Maya J. First-year nursing student, Mercy Hills College of Health. Recipient of the E. Lee Anonymous Award. C. E. Lee. Dolores never called me daughter. But she left a trail, only I would follow. A scholarship. A name. A girl walking halls I once walked. And maybe, just maybe, Dolores knew she couldn't give me back the years. But she could give someone else a start. Mercy Hills looked smaller than I remembered. The benches were the same. The courtyard clock still ran 5 minutes fast. Even the hallway floors squeaked in the same places. I didn't come as a speaker, didn't call ahead, just walked the halls with my ID badge tucked in my coat pocket. I found the skills lab on the 2nd floor. Glass wall, 6 beds. One upright skeleton with a stethoscope around its neck. Inside, a girl with a blue spiral notebook and dark curly hair was practicing how to start an IV on a mannequin arm. I knew it was her. Maya J. She looked like energy wrapped in skin. Laughed at something another student said. Held the needle with careful hands, but not stiff ones. I didn't go in. Didn't wave. Didn't introduce myself. Some meetings don't need names. Downstairs I asked the student desk if I could leave something in box Fun 114. No letters or food. The receptionist warned. It's just paper, I said. That night, I folded one copy of Summer Practice, printed from the scan I kept all these years. I slipped it into an envelope. No return address. No note. Just one line written on the front. For when your hands forget, but your heart remembers. Us. I left it in the drop slot the next morning. Didn't wait to see if she opened it. Didn't check back. On my way out, I paused at the top of the front steps. Looked back once. The building stood quiet. Windows lit gold by the 9 a.m. sun. I whispered. Not to anyone in particular. Play it wrong. But don't stop. It showed up in my locker a week later. No envelope. No return address. Just folded once, tucked between my thermos and a half-eaten protein bar. The handwriting was a little messy, a few letters too large, like someone who didn't write much outside of lab notes. It began, S. To whoever left the music, I don't know who you are. But I needed this. I stopped breathing for just a second. Read on. I've been failing IV skills, shaking too much. Almost dropped the class last week. But I took that sheet music to the piano at my church. Played it wrong, played it anyway. Something in me stayed. I think that matters. Thank you. Just no signature. No plea to reveal myself. Just those lines, simple, unfinished, real. I sat in the break room for a long time. Didn't say a word. Didn't need to. Some echoes don't make sound, but still fill the room. I didn't keep the note. Didn't tape it to my locker. Didn't frame it like proof I mattered. I folded it once. Slipped it into my coat pocket. Let it ride beside me for a few more hours. Then, quietly, let it go. Legacy isn't something you hold. It's something that holds someone else just long enough so they can stay standing. That evening, I walked back into the ICU, fresh admit. Low BP, nervous family in the hall. I snapped on gloves, checked monitors, reset tubing, and whispered. To myself, to no one, to everyone. All right. Let's try again. From the top. Some month after Dolores passed, I filed the paperwork. No lawyer. No press release. Just one online form and a quiet line at the bank. Yes, the Esther Fund, as a micro-scholarship for women over 40 returning to school after caregiving. Not nurses. Not students. Not yet. Just women who'd spent a decade keeping others alive. Ali and forgotten how to ask for space to live themselves. I didn't tie my name to it. Didn't list my credentials. Didn't pose for a founder's bio. Under mission statement. I type for the ones no one framed. Mercy Hills agreed to host the application portal. Small pilot program. 2 recipients per year, enough for textbooks, gas, a second chance. One woman applied just 3 days in. 47. Former CNA, dropped out in 2009 when her mother was diagnosed with early-onset Alzheimer's. She wrote, I don't know if I still have it in me, but I want to try. I want my daughter to see me finish something with my name on it. I didn't meet her. Didn't need to. Instead, I mailed a welcome letter. Simple envelope. No return address. Inside a printed version of Summer Practice. A high-resolution scan. First time I ever shared it without shame. Below the title, I added one line. Here's music doesn't need to be finished to be real. Boss, no instructions. No deadline. Just recognition of a melody that survives even when the hands tremble. That afternoon, I sat at my desk. Cup of cold tea. Post-it notes curling at the corners. An alert popped up. New application. I opened the file. 53 years old. 2 grown kids. Worked retail nights so she could be home during the day for a brother with cerebral palsy. She wrote the Simran. I've never called myself a caregiver. I just called it family. But I think it's okay to want something back. Dyke, I stared at her words. Not with pity. With awe. And whispered, to the woman I used to be. Woo, and the one just coming back? Let's keep them in the frame. It took me 24 years to come back. No one asked why I stayed away. No one noticed. Grief doesn't always scream. Sometimes it just gets good at being quiet. The cemetery was smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I'd just grown around the ache. Section D, row 3. Stone 14. Ahars Esther Lee 1947-2001. That's all it said. No quote, no flowers. Not even a bench nearby. Just grass and gravel and silence. I didn't bring roses. Didn't kneel. Didn't cry. Just sat down on the earth beside her dar and pulled out one thing. The music. Summer Practice. Printed fresh. Edges straight. Ink bold. I didn't read it like notes. I read it like memory. Measure by measure. Bar by bar. Saw her pencil marks in my head. The ones that told me where to breathe. I whispered, Osses. You stayed in the melody even when they took your name, boss. Not a eulogy. Not forgiveness. A recognition. I folded the paper once. Slid it under the stone. Not hidden, just held. Let it stay in the place she'd been asked to disappear from. I stood slowly. Back cracked. Wind picked up. No sign. No whisper from the clouds. No sudden warmth. Just me. Still standing. I didn't look back when I walked to the gate. Didn't need to. She wasn't behind me. She was in the hands of a girl I never met, holding a stethoscope for the first time. She was in the phrase on a grant form that said, caregiver. Without shame, she was in every unfinished song someone dared to play anyway. I reached my car. Started the engine. Took a breath. The kind you only take it when you know it's the last one you'll owe someone else. The melody still played in my head. Not perfect, not polished, but mine, and finally, in enough. Not every story ends with reconciliation. Some end with quiet truth. With a daughter folding a name that was never offered and choosing to let it go. Vivian never heard an apology. She never got her photo on the wall. But she wrote her own frame, one that holds others now. And maybe that's the legacy, not the names we're given, but the ones we lift when no one's looking. Because silence can be justice. And survival, on your own terms, can be the loudest form of love.